Wow. So it has been a couple days. If you are following political news at all, I am sure you are asking, what is going on? And if you live in Gwinnett County, doubly that. But I wanted to give a little recap about what has happened so far in our redistricting session, which is the process in which the lines are drawn to determine what areas will elect a representative collectively. So what areas what group of people will represent a elect a state representative, what group of people will elect a state senator, and then what group of people will elect each congressional representative that we have. However, in Gwinnett, we have seen an extra piece of legislation get introduced that should technically not have been introduced, that also is attempting to redraw both our school board and our commission. So there is a lot more going on currently. Let me update you first on the things that we were supposed to be doing, and then I'll talk a little bit about the things that we were not supposed to be doing but seem to be doing anyways. So thus far, both the state house and the state senate have drawn their own maps. So looking at which groups of people will elect a representative together or a senator together, and then those went through the committee process and the floor vote, so the entire Senate or House voted on those. It's worth noting that the Senate was only Republicans voted for it, and on the House side there was actually bipartisan opposition, but it still passed. So all of the Democrats and several of the Republicans also said, no, this is not a map that we believe best reflects the interests of Georgians, but it was voted through by the majority of Republicans. So now those each go to the other chamber because we have to vote both on the House side and the Senate side on any piece of legislation that goes through. So the House maps now go to the Senate, and the Senate maps now come to the House. So that's kind of the stage we're in for the main redistricting for the Georgia House and Senate districts. We still do not have a proposed congressional map from the State House Republicans. So we do not know what they intend to propose for our congressional map. We do have a map from the Senate Republicans and from the House Democrats, but not from the House Republicans. So that, until we get more information, we are at a pause. What has happened in the past couple days, though, is two bills got introduced that should have been local legislation, which are actually acknowledged as local legislation, but they got introduced into a general committee. So they're bills that specifically look at the Gwinnett School Board, and it's doing two things there. The Gwinnett School Board, it is changing where our district lines are, leaving them as 5, and it's moving it from a partisan to a nonpartisan race, which means it goes from having a May primary and a November general to having an election only in May, which is a big impact on which voters are actually casting votes in the school board, because we know that we have a much larger turnout in a general election. So reflecting the will of Georgians or Gwinnetians, we are reflecting the will of a lot more Gwinnetians with a general election with a November ballot. And that bill was debated in less than 30 minutes, or maybe it was actually 30 minutes, in the committee in the Senate that it was introduced to, which was not the local, and it was not approved by the local delegation, which it was supposed to have been as a local bill. It was not, there was no communication with the school board on it, and there was no public input. So it was a map drawn entirely by one relationship of one group of people, which was the Republican legislator who dropped it, and apparently also with the support of other Republican House members and the reapportionment office. So the school board didn't get to weigh in, the community didn't get to weigh in. The decision to move from the November general election to the nonpartisan May primary also was not a decision that was made in consultation with anyone other than these few people. So there was a whole bunch that was problematic with that, as well as the way that it was passed in committee is worth a watch. And you can actually view that if you go to legis.ga.gov and go back to the 10th you can look at the committee that's it's SLOGO, State and Local Government Committee, in the Senate side, and you can listen to that entire hearing so you know what actually transpired there. And then a second bill was also dropped by the same legislator. Again, it's a local bill. It's identified as a local bill, as in committee today. However, it is being presented as general legislation. And that bill totally restructures our county commission. So it takes our county commission, which is currently 5 total commissioners, 1 commission chair who represents the entire county, and 4 individual commissioners who represent different zones in the county. And it actually moves us to a 10-person board. So because it's in a 10-person board, that board is eligible to have ties. So instead of having a 10-person board with voting members, they have removed the chair from being able to vote at all unless there is a tie, but there are 9 other members. So effectively, the chair moves to having very, very little authority on that board. And it has now made 9 districts within Gwinnett. So that is a very big change. Again, the board was not consulted. The people of Gwinnett were not consulted. That was an independent decision made by this single legislator and whomever else he did talk to about it. And it is supported by only Republican legislators. So both of those bills are quite concerning because they do not reflect the will of Gwinnetians, because Gwinnetians weren't consulted, whether through the legislative delegation and the normal process we have for submitting bills, which would require the majority of the delegation to approve of it, or even talking to and showing people the maps and asking about the bills, and asking whether we really did want those changes to happen. So overall, there has been almost no input, which is quite problematic.